His name is Ralph Painter, and he was Arizona's first television news photographer, shooting stories on silent black and white 16mm film for KPHO-TV 5. The very first bit of local news film appeared in the summer of 1952, A Large Fire. But over the years, he shot every imaginable kind of news story. Later, when sound news film came along, he would sometimes roll the film, then get in front of the camera to conduct the interview. Ralph Painter, an important pioneer in Arizona television news. It is well known that KPHO-TV 5 began broadcasting in December of 1949, the very first television station in Arizona. And with it came Arizona's first television newsman, Jack Murphy. Through the 1950s, he was as recognizable as any citizen in the valley, reporting stories ranging from a Miss Arizona pageant to the tragic airline crash at the Grand Canyon. Murphy, who is now retired and lives in Wickenburg, also had a long career with the United States Information Agency. Jack Murphy, a pioneer broadcaster who laid the foundation for modern television news in Arizona.
Completion of plans for the construction of the tallest skyscraper in the Rocky Mountain state, a 30-story, $12 million office building for downtown Phoenix, has just been announced. Builder Herman Shannon. The building has approximately 500,000 gross square feet of construction in it, and it has 3 underground levels of parking to accommodate about 300 cars.
As the project moved forward, the scale was cut from 30 stories to 20, but it was completed as the Arizona Title Building on the southwest corner of First Avenue and Monroe. Kids used to ride horses there until fellows like Del Webb came along with their local boy makes good stories. A small contractor, Webb, in time built military bases, hotels, resorts, and ultimately developed Sun City. He once even owned the New York Yankees. Here we see him on the left in 1960, orchestrating a groundbreaking ceremony for a little project that came to be known as Christown Mall. There was a time in the valley when the social mores said riding a bicycle was strictly the domain of boys between the ages of 8 and 13, as seen in the safety film from the early 50s. Girls over 12 viewed it as unladylike. And a teenage boy would have sooner died than be seen riding a bike to high school. That history made it all the more significant that times had changed by the early 70s, the great bicycle renaissance, and the formal dedication in downtown Phoenix of a bike rack. We've mentioned before that folks in the valley have a love affair with the automobile. It used to be that every September, the new models came out. And each looked different from the other. Fords, Chevys, as witnessed at this 1957 Phoenix Auto Show. Today you could pick up these 43-year-old cars for a few $100 each. Well, maybe not all of them. According to state historian Marshall Trimble, the first Little League baseball teams in Arizona came in 1952. And he ought to know, having been the right fielder on the Tri-City All-Stars. Those 3 cities were Ash Fork, Seligman, and Williams. They lost the first championship to Prescott. Little League was pretty rural that first year, but city kids wanted to play too, and they did in 1953. A couple of years later, these West Phoenix Granada School players got to don their first uniforms, just like the big leagues. Unfortunately, it's still a very common occurrence and a very dangerous situation. People trying to drive through a flooded wash and getting stuck. Don't do it. We'll replay this mid-50s Scottsdale footage and tell you that this fellow should have just left the old car in the wash and gone over here and bought all this land. He'd be worth a fortune today. It is a little-known Arizona tradition that children love to go out and play in them. Although adults are very much aware they can be dangerous. We're not talking about swimming pools, and that's not a big haystack in the background of this shot. It is some amazing wide-angle 1971 film footage of an old-fashioned Arizona dust storm. True Arizonans are well rehearsed with the line, "It's a dry heat," emphasis on the dry. Hot, yes, but dry. Remember that the valley gets only 7 inches of rainfall per year. Otherwise, it's dry. Oh, sure, there is the occasional windstorm that might blow down a tree or do a little damage here and there, but it's typically dry damage. So we can't understand this old film from the mid-50s that implies Phoenix being other than dry. We wonder if maybe it was actually shot in Portland. During the past 30 years, Arizona industry and government have worked together on the subject of air pollution. It is especially important in winter when air inversions hold down the particulate matter. If you think progress hasn't been made, look at this film of the Phoenix sky in November 1956, when the population of the valley was only 15% the size it is today. It's always fun to look at old pictures of Phoenix and see how much things have changed. Most of the steadier aerial film of the valley was shot from the Goodyear blimp, like this post-war footage from Barry Goldwater's collection. The blimp was developed by the Goodyear Corporation and manufactured for the U.S. Navy. They were used extensively during World War II. But what you may not know is that from the 1940s through the 1980s, virtually all of the blimps were manufactured at the old Goodyear aircraft plant in Litchfield Park, Arizona. This is one of those visual stories. It's about the Phoenix Suns of nearly 30 years ago. Things look pretty much the same, with a few exceptions. That's film, not videotape. The uniforms are a little different. The players were different. There's Neil Walk. And that's Connie Hawkins. And here's their young coach of those days, Cotton Fitzsimmons. But things look pretty much the same. ASU alums might recognize this as the big ASU U of A game at the old Goodwin Stadium on campus. They might, but they'd be wrong. This mid-50s Phoenix-Tucson battle took place in Montgomery Stadium at Phoenix Union High. Arizona State's home field didn't have enough seating. It was a big problem. But these Sun Devils, whitewashing the School A, were close to the solution. Yeah, right at the bottom of that hill. That's where they built Sun Devil Stadium. Arizonans have a long history of traveling in the fast lane. These old shots of skiers and sledders at the Snow Bowl were only the beginning. Then, when Phoenician Jimmy Bryan won the Indy 500 in 1958, it really whetted the appetite. So it should have come as no surprise that folks in the valley, especially young folks in the valley, would jump at the chance to win the big one, vicariously, during the big go-kart craze of the late 50s. Starting in 1948, folks in the Valley were big fans of the Phoenix Senators baseball team, later called the Phoenix Stars. They played at the original Municipal Stadium at Central and Mojave. Here we see a 1956 game between the Stars and the Tucson Cowboys. We don't know who won, but we do know that just up the street, 1 mile and 50 years away, we'd find Bank One Ballpark and the Arizona Diamondbacks. If the Valley is known for anything, it is its many fine golf courses. Of course, a golf course is just an empty field without golfers. And we've had lots of them, some famous, even if not for golf. Here's Joe DiMaggio playing in the Phoenix Pro-Am during the 1950s. But these are the early golfers who, over the decades, have kept the game going. Today, we spend millions urging people not to smoke. Cigarettes are heavily taxed, but 40 years ago, it was novel when Governor Fannin urged a 5-cent increase in the tobacco tax. Given the times, his proposal must have raised a lot of money. As we remember earlier times in the Valley, it is obvious that medical care has changed a lot. Take this Scottsdale hospital executive announcing a revolutionary experiment in 1971. 20% of the hospital rooms would be designated as non-smoking.
Mrs. Nell, how do you feel about non-smoking wards? Do you think it's a pretty good idea?
I think that's a step forward. I think it's the most fabulous thing they can come up with.
Do you have much of a problem being around smokers?
Yes, I do. I'm very sensitive to smoking.
How about your family? Does anyone in your family smoke?
Very few of them. And the ones that are trying to quit.
The Vietnam War era was a divisive time for America, and Arizonans were on each side of the debate. There were veterans' parades and the awarding of medals. There were peace organizations and anti-Vietnam protesters. But the two sides seem to have had a shared concern for the fate of POWs and MIAs. Indeed, a few years later, Arizonans would elect a former prisoner of war, John McCain, to the U.S. Senate. It may have seemed unlikely that a desert area like central Arizona would come to have a special relationship with the U.S. Navy. Of course, there have been sailors from every state. But our special relationship started on this fateful day, December 7th, 1941. The sinking of the USS Arizona made the name Arizona known throughout the world. Eventually, the Navy retrieved the ship's silver service from the bottom of Pearl Harbor. And more than 50 years later, you can see it at the Arizona State Capitol Museum. Okay, so what does a bulldozer and a bunch of politicians have in common? Let me think. They can both dig themselves into a hole? Ha, ha, ha. Well, in 1956, they joined forces to dig this hole. The basement of the then new and modern Arizona House of Representatives building. In the study of Arizona's past, no one has ever written a comprehensive history of the state legislature. But if they did, two individuals would stand out. Representative Burton Barr, A Phoenix Republican, was the House Majority Leader during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He was well known for bringing warring factions together on common ground to pass legislation. Well, we all have our role models, and if you'd have asked, Burton Barr might have mentioned Senator Harold Giss, a Yuma Democrat, who was the Senate Majority Leader during Arizona's first boom period in the 1950s and 60s. TV news used to include sound bites that lasted 2 or 3 minutes. Folks had plenty to say in 1960. Take this fellow from the Phoenix Union High School District. He was thanking the voters for going to the polls to approve a bond issue that funded construction of several new high schools.
We are eternally grateful to the Citizens Committee for a magnificent job, to the newspapers and the radio and TV, for their splendid support, and to all who worked so hard.
It was a pretty common thing as Phoenix was growing into the big city that it became. Americans are known to sometimes complain about airlines. Planes are crowded, flights are delayed, and if you don't like peanuts, you're in big trouble. Now, if you yearn for the good old days, remember that the fastest express service to Chicago in 1956 was 5 hours. New York City was 8 hours, with a stop in the middle. Of course, with finding a parking space, going through security, and circling the field, it isn't much better than that today. There was a time in Phoenix when folks took certain traditions quite seriously. Take the Phoenix Jaycees Rodeo of Rodeos, for example, seen here in 1959. For an entire week, each March, it was the rule that you simply did not go out in public unless you dressed Western. Violators were arrested on site and subject to immediate punishment, and it was embarrassing. That is, it was embarrassing for the donkey, having to parade around with a city slicker on his back. Well, this is another one of those bits of Valley history found on old film that we're not too sure about. We know it's 1959. We're pretty sure it's at the old Goodwin Stadium on the ASU campus. And we're positive it's not an early Frank Cush Sun Devil football team. Beyond that, we figure it was either some kind of Greek Week fraternity games affair, or Charlton Heston was in town making one of those epic movies he used to do. Well, Christmas is coming, and as usual, the post office is geared up for the crush of holiday greeting cards. Arizonans like to send them to snowbound relatives back east. It was no different in the 50s, as we see postal workers loading an airplane. Of course, back then, it was called airmail, and you actually had to buy special airmail stamps if you wanted your greetings flown across the country. If memory serves, airmail cost 6 cents compared to 4 cents on the train. During the war in Vietnam, members of the Arizona Air National Guard made regular transport flights from their home base to the battle zones of Southeast Asia. It wasn't the first time Air Guardsmen had been called into action. The Guard has a proud history. But what may not be well known is that the Arizona Air National Guard was organized just after World War II by a local man named Barry Goldwater. In 1957, there was not yet a lot of interest or concern about the conservation of natural resources. So the display of this early solar energy device was quite a novelty. Remember, at the time, builders were promoting their all-electric homes, and gasoline cost about 30 cents a gallon. 14 years brought a lot of changes to the Valley's consciousness, as we see in this 1971 footage of the new conservation rage, the recycling of aluminum cans. In the early 1970s, a major political battle in Arizona was over proposed farm labor legislation. At the forefront of the fight were members and supporters of the United Farm Workers Union, headed by Cesar Chavez. The immediate cause may have been over working conditions and human rights, but the effort served the additional purpose of uniting Arizona's Mexican-American community and enhancing the self-image of Hispanic citizens throughout the country. The theme of the 1958 State Fair was Into the Future, and with good reason. The Russians had launched 2 Sputniks. The space race was on. There was no NASA yet, but the Naval Research Laboratory was displaying what they hoped would be America's first Earth orbiter.
We have a full-scale model of the Earth satellite as put out by the United States. This will be a 20-inch sphere weighing 21.5 pounds. It'll have 4 antennas, as you see it there, about 30 inches each.
A 20-inch sphere weighing 21.5 pounds. It makes you realize how amazingly far we've come in 42 years.